Okay, tonight we're going to look at the second lesson, which will be an overview, and you'll see quickly what it means. The first page of our second lesson, thank you for that soundtrack. The first page of our second lesson will be a very, very big overview, and then we're going to come down to a smaller scale overview, and then the third page come down further yet. So we're going to kind of start big and focus to lower levels. But the evening will be spent pretty much in an overview of different worldviews. Oh, I forgot to greet you in my newly learned hip-hop language. Don't worry, it's a different phrase than last night.
We'll use that one.
I realize I'm now the talk of the town, and the DVD watchers will, I'm sure, talk about me. But my new phrase, it's much safer. Yo, what'd he do? I'd like to give credit to my hip-hop master, the yoga Pastor E. Wayne Gaddis, hip-hop yoga, who taught me that phrase. Oh, thank you, Juan Kenobi. Okay, now, overview. What did I know? I'm just, taking in what somebody tells me.
You get trouble.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. Okay, I'm going to do some geometry here to illustrate this big, big overview. I think this first question will be quite easy on you. Who has the biggest view and the view and the most accurate view of all of reality? God. Okay, we're off to a good start tonight. I got a good feeling about tonight. All right, God. So we're gonna make this square symbolize God's view of everything. Tonight's first topic is a view of reality. And that word is deep. Reality. In fact, I think it's deeper than you may suspect. Reality. So we're going to make this square symbolize God. So we'll call this box divine. I'll give you your handout after I ask some more questions. I want to ask a few more questions before I give you all the answers in the handout. So, divine, ultimate, and there's a word here I'm going to leave out. I want to have you guess what that is. Reality. Divine, ultimate, / something, reality. So here's part of the reason why the word reality, the concept reality, is quite deep and profound. There are actually various kinds of reality. What is the reality that's going on this very moment? Okay, but is this a theoretical or is this a... Okay, this is a factual reality, or you could say actual. Okay, what is the complement to actual reality?
Virtue, true.
Well, actual is true. We're truly here. This is truly a class. So actual can be true. Not always, though. Sometimes actual is not really true in the second sense I'm looking for. But this is actual reality. Okay, there's perceived reality. That's another kind of reality. Perceived. Perfect. Assumed. Okay, there's perfect. Another word for that would be ideal, wouldn't it? Ideal, perfect, or synonyms, okay? So there's ideal reality. So are we right now at this moment experiencing and living in ideal reality? No. We know from the Word of God that, and from experience, that there's something wrong with us and something wrong with the world, which is explained by the term the fall and the curse. So this is real. The curse is real. The fall is real. Sin is real. We are real. This class is real. But we would call this actual reality. with all of its warts and scars and problems. But there's also an ideal reality. Wouldn't you agree? The way things should be, the way things can be, and we believe they will be eventually by God's power. And of course, when things began, it was more ideal. So we're going to call this box, which is the biggest geometry we'll use on this board tonight, we'll call it ultimate ideal reality. Kind of like I didn't make a perfect square, but just imagine this is a perfect square. So the perfect square symbolizes perfect ideal reality, the way things maybe were before and they will be again. And in God's mind, He has a picture of the ideal, the perfect. Sense? Okay, so also this is the same thing. This is still the box. This is God's box, God's view. The square symbolizes that. This also represents how God sees things. How God sees the world. And the world means the universe, everything. The word world means for us everything. How God sees the world. Wayne, did I say it right? How'd he do? I mean, what'd he do? What'd he do? Okay. I did it right. Okay. I want to make sure when I go into the hood tomorrow with my Oakland Raiders jacket, I'll be okay. Yeah, right.
Making up words.
Yeah, if I can go into the hood in my Oakland Raiders sweatshirt, we'll have to change the class to eschatology, the end times. It'll be the end of me. Okay, now, any questions on that? Is that clear? This big box, ideal reality, ultimate, make sense? We're all together here? Okay. Now, the next best perspective of reality, the next best, the closest we can come to the ideal would be what? How God sees what kind of reality? In His mind, He sees the ideal, but He also sees the actual. He sees how things really are presently. Okay, so we'll make that be the next largest geometric symbol, a big circle that also comes close to being the same size as the box. But because it's actual, it's not totally perfect. It's not quite as good as the box symbolism, the square. So we'll call this divine. And there's a fancy word that means the closest to the ultimate, but it's not quite the ultimate, so it's called, can you guess? It has the same ending as ultimate.
Alternate.
Well, there's a better word than that.
Actual?
Penultimate. Have you heard that word before? Penultimate? Fancy word. It means, almost as good as the ultimate. Kind of like second. The second best is the penultimate. So you use this new word to impress your friends. Penultimate. Yeah, I learned what he do, you'll learn penultimate. It's a trade. Penultimate. Now we use the word also actual. Penultimate / actual reality. The way things are currently. This is important to go through this because different cultures use that word reality differently. And because Scripture, as you're going to find out in a minute as we go along here, the Scripture also has layers of reality, different layers or different perspectives. And they're all going on whether we know it or not. So it's good to know, at least to have our mind expanded here, to understand what reality is at all the different layers, with all the different perspectives and cultures interacting. Okay, so does that make sense? So God also sees actual reality. He sees the whole picture, but He also has in His mind the ideal, the perfect. Does it make sense so far? Anybody lost yet? Okay, now, what is another perspective besides God's? Okay, human. Okay, human perspective. And how well do we see things? Even as Christians. As well, okay, that's right, glass darkly. So I'm guessing that means not as good as this circle. Not as good as the circle, okay? So we're going to use smaller geometric form, and we'll make it a dashed line because it's not, always the same. We keep changing our view, and other cultures have different views, so, it's not quite as permanent or fixed. So I'm going to symbolize that by a smaller geometric symbol for that view of reality, and use a triangle, and I'll use a dashed line because it's not as fixed, because we are fickle people. We're not as stable as God in His perspective. He doesn't change His view, but we keep revising ours. Yeah, Stephen.
Why wouldn't actual reality and human reality be the same?
Well, it's a matter of perception. Reality, the way, again, we have this principle: event. A thing happens, we see the same thing, we experience the same thing, but we all blank that differently. What's that blank word? Perceive, or you could also say, we used a different word last night, but it's the same thing as perceive. This is the same thing. If I hold this in front of people here or in a battlefield, it's the same thing. This hasn't changed. Okay, this is the same event. But here, if I hold it out, it'll be interpreted differently if I go to a battlefield. Battlefield, this is I surrender. But it's still the same thing. I can bring it inside this classroom. It's the same thing. So we all see the same thing, but we interpret it as, oh, he must have a cold, Or
surrender.
He's sweating. Or yeah, I give up. You're wearing me out. As a class, I surrender. Only $9.95 for this prayer cloth. $9.95. I don't checks.
Interpretation.
Okay. So it's a matter of, Stephen, maybe the same thing's happening, but we just don't perceive it the same way. We interpret things differently. So, there's a famous saying, reality is what you make of it, or how you perceive of it. But that's why it's kind of a broken line there. We all perceive things differently. So we're going to call this human alternate. Alternate. So it doesn't really match up with God's view, and it's a different view at various places. Sometimes we converge with God's view, sometimes we don't. But it is an alternate. Subjective, because we don't have perfect objectivity, so it's subjective, but in part, it can be, at times, partly objective reality, actual reality. I'm sorry, it's the word reality. Okay. This is all copied for you. I had this in your notes. I'll give it to you in a minute. So human, subjective, and objective reality. Does that make sense? We're still together here? No. Nobody's getting lost? Okay. There's one more element of reality. Another perspective.
Distorted?
Imagine.
Well, it happens to be distorted, and who has that perspective?
Satan.
Okay, the demonic perspective. The demonic perspective. Now, why do I say demonic and not just angel? I could put angel on here, and it would make our drawing more complicated, but I think the angels, the holy angels, the unfallen angels, perhaps they have the same view as God. Perhaps. But because demons are fallen, we're fallen, they're fallen, so they obviously have distortion in their view. So, put them on here, and we're going to make an oval. But I'm sure they don't have things all figured out either, because they're fallen, so I'll give them a dashed line. So that will symbolize the demonic actual reality. Demonic, alternate. Now I use the word actual, and I'll ask you why I'm doing that. Actual reality. Why do I put actual for them and not for us?
Because the demons never change.
Okay, they don't change. They're kind of fixed forever in their evilness. But why else are they actual? What do they see that's more actual than what we see?
They see the spiritual realm.
Do they have a hard time believing that we exist, you think? Do we have a hard time believing they exist? Yeah. Even as Christians, we sometimes forget about them. Or we think, oh, that guy in the office, he is the problem, and we forget about Ephesians 6. Our real enemy is not that guy, or at least our main enemy. Yeah, he's an enemy, but not the main one. Right? Ephesians 6 says that the main enemy are the principalities and powers that influence that guy. Now, he still is that guy, whoever that guy is. He's responsible for his own sin, his own problems, but our greater enemy is demonic enemies, who can so easily manipulate us and influence us and so forth. So I put the word actual because they have, strangely enough, a clearer picture of reality than we do. Because they know that they're in existence, and they know that we are in existence, and they know that God is in existence. There is no such thing as an atheistic demon or agnostic demon. They don't have those isms. They don't have agnosticism, which means what? The no, not N-O-T, and nos means the word knowledge. So agnosticism means there's no knowledge of God. They don't know if he exists or not. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Do demons have that?
No.
Yeah. Do demons have atheism? There is no God? No. Okay, so that's why it's more actual. They know what's going on. They know about reality very well, at least better than we do. So it's more actual. They see the real picture. And they know that we exist, but we have a hard time knowing they exist because they're unseen to us. So that's why I put the word actual there. Welcome, Frederick and Juan.
Is it accurate, though, from that statement, knowing that they have a clearer understanding of reality or actual reality than man to make their circle smaller than human alternate?
Well,
or size matters.
Yeah, there's not really a real reason why I chose oval per se. It's just that I had to choose a different geometric symbol, and because we're going to focus in our class on our view as humans. So, but I want to put them in there. So don't worry too much about the oval. What does it mean smaller? But anyway, we have here 4 layers. So we have God's ideal, God's actual, our semi-subjective, objective, and then demonic actual. And those are all on all at the same time, all the time. Okay, question back here.
The word alternate, why is it being used in each reference point?
Well, these two. Because we don't agree with God perfectly, even as Christians. There is no perfect Christian except, well, Jesus Christ. It's kind of funny calling him a Christian, but but among non-Jesus Christ people, there is no perfect person on this planet. So we go off somewhere. We go astray somewhere, right? So we have an alternate view at some point, all the time.
So we're alternate from Christ.
From God. Yeah, this is the ideal, and this is the perfect actual. And we have partly subjective, my opinion, I think, I don't know, I think, I feel, but maybe I'm wrong. Sometimes I get some things right, but in the whole package, I'm still not perfectly in sync with God's way of looking at things. So I'm an alternative view. I'm not totally wrong, but I'm not perfectly straight on with what is reality all the time. They are better than we are. That's why I call actual. They see things better than we do. They know the ball game better than we do. But they're still an alternate because they don't like God. They don't want to be in compliance with Him. They end up, being His servants against their desire. But they still are trying to be an alternate. They are because they promote evil, and God does not do that. So does that make sense? No? Okay, so here's your handout. You will have a test on the concepts below the box. You don't have to draw this drawing for a test. If the drawing doesn't help you, never mind. The main thing are the headings in type beneath that drawing. So here is that page. Could I ask, now Leslie and Irv have a bad back, so Brother Fairley and Juan, Frederick and Juan, would you mind moving up to some chairs? I wanted the class to kind of sit closer, but Leslie and Irv have to sit back there. But if you don't mind, you two gentlemen, if you could move up and find a chair. Because I thought last night's intimacy was a lot better for our conversation, so I wanted to recapture last night's closeness. Thank you for doing that. We'll let Irv and Leslie have that because they have a bad back. They have to kind of stand up or lay down sometimes. Thanks a lot. You might be cooler at that chair there, though. You might kind of fry up here. Yeah, Stephen.
So like these bottom is going to be on the test?
Yeah. For your test, focus on the bottom of this page, the typing. Just know the basic, concepts of these main titles. Thank you, Frederick. Make a note that for your test, the bottom half of the page for your test, the basic points in type, God's ultimate ideal, and now I have the word future because it's not here now. It'll be coming in the future. Someday we'll have the ideal reality, at least for His redeemed people. How God sees the world or the all in terms of the ideal in His mind. There should be. Now, when I teach theology, I teach God's will this way. The next line talks about God's will. This has helped me personally tremendously in my theology. Because I think people stumble all the time about the phrase, God's will. For example, in our churches, haven't you pastors had this question posed to you many times? Pastor, I'm trying to find God's will for something. Okay? Or they say, Pastor, was it God's will that my brother died? Or was it God's will that, Hurricane Katrina wiped out New Orleans? Is that God's will? Isn't that a common problem? What is God's will? Okay. I think this will be immensely helpful. If you haven't had this before, I think this will be very helpful and very practical for you and your church. I think it's best if we look at three aspects of God's will. Now, God's will is singular. He's not all chopped up, but if you look at the whole, just like He's a Trinity, He's three persons but one God. So you got to keep those two things in mind. He's one entity in a way, and yet He's also three. In the same way, His will is holistic, but you could also find there are three aspects that make up that holistic will. So He doesn't have this compartment. Okay, what do I do here in this compartment? How about this compartment? How about this compartment? He just kind of immediately, does the right thing, but really to help us understand why He does what He does and why what happens, I think this is very helpful. You can look at the aspect called prescriptive, the prescriptive aspect of His will. Just like a prescription is like ideal. What He deems should be. Can you think of an example in Scripture that would illustrate the prescriptive aspect of His will, what should be? Is there a famous list of some stuff in the Old Testament? 10 Commandments. Isn't that a prescription? It's a prescription. It's the ideal. This is what you should do. It doesn't mean we will do it, but you should. So isn't that His will that we do the 10 Commandments? So it's God's will that we do the 10 Commandments. We don't do it, and He knows we're not going to do it, at least not perfectly, but it's His will that we do it. So it's the prescriptive aspect. Does that make sense? So when things don't happen, and we say, is that God's will? Yes and no. How is it yes? The next one. When bad things happen, like Katrina, the yes There's a yes and no when things happen often. And the yes, Katrina happened, yes, it's God's will. How is it God's will? Because He likes it? Because He likes to hurt people? You could say for sure, without going out of bounds theologically, you could say the second aspect is permissive. He allowed it. Is God sovereign or not? Is God the boss or not? What is He? Okay, if He's God, the boss, the chief, the top, if He's sovereign, but yet Katrina happened, so if He's sovereign, then He must have permitted it. If He's not sovereign, then He can't help it. He's impotent. He's not strong enough to keep those typhoons or hurricanes away. But since we think He is strong enough that He could have kept it away, but He chose not to keep it away, He allowed it to happen. We might not know why He allowed it, but He did allow it, didn't He? If you believe He's omnipotent, if He's almighty, then you have to say, at the very least, He allowed it. We might never know why, but He did allow it. So, when bad things happen and the person says, is that God's will? Well, you could say yes and no. So how would you say yes and no about Katrina? How do these first two things help us? Number one, number two.
His permission.
Okay, is that a yes or a no? That it's His will. Yes, He allowed it, but no, it's not. It's not the ideal. It's not how things should have been or are supposed to be. If we hadn't fallen, would we have those things? No. I don't think Eden would have had hurricanes that hurt people. Or planet Earth that would be as good as Eden without a fall. So, it's a yes and no. Is it God's will? Yes and no. Yes, He permitted it. No, it's not the ideal. What does this mean? Ezekiel 18, God does not take delight in the death of the wicked. It's not ideal. It's not the prescription He would like to see, that people sin and die. But, do people sin and die? Yeah, He permits us to sin and die. Pardon? That was Ezekiel 18. Ezekiel 18. God does not delight in the death of the wicked. But they do die, and they are wicked. And He allowed them to be. Okay, the third aspect, I think is very helpful, is what I call here productive. If you have a pen or a pencil, in some notes I use the word proactive. So I have PPP, teacher's trick. I have the 7 C's, now I have the 3 P's. I'm going to use the old teacher's trick of using the same letter. So prescriptive, permissive, and productive, or you could say proactive. That's where God steps in. God says, okay, it's my will to do something. I'm going to do it myself. What part of world history is a clear example where God says, I have to do this and I'm going to do it? Okay, the flood, the Advent, or another word for Advent, birth of Christ, salvation. What does it say in Isaiah 59? God looked for a man, to help and to redeem, and He says, my own right arm will have to do this. I'll have to do the work of salvation myself. My own right arm will bring salvation. So God decides, I'm going to be proactive. It's my will to save a people for myself. I'm going to be proactive. It's my will to do this, and I will to do it. So they're all kind of rolled together in the word God's will, but there really are 3 aspects: prescriptive, permissive, and proactive. Does that make sense? So there are different answers when people say, is it God's will? Yes, no. Here, yes. Here, no. So it's not a simple answer. So what I want us to do is do better than preachers on Larry King. I mentioned in other classes before, so if you're new to me, this is new to you perhaps to hear this. On Larry King, one of my main complaints is when an evangelical finally does show up on TV, and I'm going, oh good, finally we have a good representative, to not make us look foolish. Here's a person who can talk to Larry King about problems, and one of Larry King's favorite questions is, why do evil things happen, like Katrina? What is your answer, Billy Graham, or what is your answer, so-and-so, about why evil things happen like hurricanes and typhoons? Isn't God good? Isn't God loving? And so, Larry kind of likes to stick that question to us, okay? Can you guess the most common answer that they give that makes me unhappy? They say, well, Larry, I don't know. Only God knows why Katrina happened. We just got to leave it to God and trust God. That's a wimpy, weak, unhelpful answer. Now, yes, God does know more than we do, but we can do better than that. What can we say that's better than that? Why did Katrina happen? Well, I heard somebody say something else. I heard a C word. Who said the word C-U-R-S-E? Did I hear the word curse mentioned? Okay, why is there a curse? Okay, that's what I never hear. I've never heard one person in all my years of these Larry King interviews, I've never heard one person yet say, Larry, people sinned against God when He made the first people, and God, as a result, cursed them and the world. Curses include weather. The weather is cursed. The ground is cursed. Plants have thorns. They're cursed. It's not totally cursed, but it's partially cursed. Everything's partially cursed, right? So typhoons are a part of the curse. The weather patterns are cursed in part. That's why we have tornadoes and droughts and floods and hurricanes. We've had them since the fall. So one answer they could say is, besides, I don't know, only God knows, we do know in part. The world is cursed. Bad things happen. Larry, you know why they happen? Because we're bad. We have failed the standard. God, we're not perfect. He cursed us. Bad things happen. So that would tell us that the prescriptive is, we are perfect. Be perfect. And He gave us 10 commandments. That's the prescriptive. If we didn't do it, He allowed us to choose evil. That's kind of a mystery in itself, but He did allow us to choose evil. He permitted that. And now bad things happen. So that's why Katrina happened. Now maybe there's more to it than that, and there probably is. Because God knows things we don't know, but at least we can say that Katrina is part of a cursed weather pattern. And all over the world they have disasters all the time. It just so happens America got one by the curse. That's a good, safe, general answer. And it's a lot better than I don't know, only God knows, isn't it? And it's biblical. And you can prove it because we all are imperfect to show that we are fallen. If God is good and if we were good when He made us. Okay, so any questions on those aspects of His will? And those aspects kind of explain how God sees reality. God sees ideal reality. God sees what is permitted to happen as reality, and what He plans to do in His proactiveness in terms of reality. So it says, the last line under the first heading, God is the source, definer, and guide for what is ultimate, ideal, perfect reality. He will eventually bring it into future actuality. So, ready to move on? Is that clear now? I think that will help you, though, if you haven't had that before, about God's will. Prescriptive, permissive, proactive, or productive. Okay, God's penultimate, actual, present reality. This is present reality. This is how things really are. He sees how things are. And there are two subheadings, partial original good and partial subsequent curse. Is there still some original good left over from the beginning? Are trees partially good? Yeah, they're beautiful. And, we have fruit, and we have food, we have corn, and we have fruit, apples, and cherries that can be as good as they were, probably. But we also have sometimes worms in the cherries, so it's also partially cursed as a subsequent event.
What's the birthing of a baby?
The birthing of a baby has that mixture. Okay. I mean, everything has a mixture, pretty much, of good and evil, or perfection and imperfection. So I think that doesn't need a lot of deliberation. Main heading: demons, alternate, actual, and present reality. Originally, these are angels fell. Now we call them demons, who have a perverted view and exert perverted effect upon human events and interpretation. Yet they have a clearer view than we do, because they don't have, again, atheism or agnosticism or forget about that we exist. whereas we have a hard time sometimes believing or recognizing or remembering they exist. And we have atheists among us and agnostics among us. And the fourth one, humans all have present reality, two aspects, the subjective one and the objective one. Sometimes we're totally off in our own dreamland. Sometimes we're on the money and we're more objective. So it's complicated, isn't it? It's kind of complex, the word reality. There are a lot of different layers of reality and different perspectives. So this is kind of, highfalutin, a little bit theoretical and overwhelming and, maybe not all practical, but I think it helps us to get the big picture. It's not try to get, sometimes, the big picture. What is the whole? What's going on in terms of that broad term reality before we get so focused on our tiny little part of our world? So doesn't it help, just one second here, doesn't it help when you are in your little neighborhood, your little church, and your little environment, doesn't it help sometimes to look at these pictures from space, from the space station or the satellites or the space capsules? Isn't it nice to kind of get the picture of the whole? You see the beautiful oceans and the clouds and atmosphere, and you kind of get the whole, and you kind of remember, okay, I'm just part of a bigger thing. So we're trying to give you here this huge overview to help us get the big picture of worldviews. Okay, comments here, James.
Last night you had spoken about beings, like or persons, that there are only three types: of course, divine, then human, and demonic.
There are four types, four kinds of beings in Scripture.
Oh, animals.
Yeah, so divine being, angelic being, human being, animal being.
But animals don't have a reality.
They do. I could have included, but I didn't want to get too complicated.
I was just trying to connect them.
But yeah, we could have animals. Don't animals have views of things? Mm-hmm. They have mind, emotion, will. They have a view. It's very narrow. It's very limited. So I could have done animals. Yeah, it's a good point. But I didn't choose to put everything on here. But you could have put animals on here because animals have a view. And animals have value, at least to God. He gave them a mind, emotion, will. Limited, but some of that. So yeah, we could also add them if we wanted to. And if you're in some parts of the world, they would have other beings, so they think, and include those perspectives. Okay, now we're going to get a little more realistic and look at some aspects within that broad picture. And this is going to perhaps overwhelm you a little bit, but you don't have to know all this. No one fully masters this next sheet, but we have to at least look at it and be aware of the broadness of worldviews. Can someone give me some basic isms? I heard a person say there are 7 basic worldviews. I'm going to give you 8. But what are the 7 or 8, whatever you can come up with? What are some basic isms? Okay, pantheism. What does that mean? Okay, pan means all. Okay, theism means God. So all is God, God is all. Okay, what religion is that way? Okay, not all, but many Hindus are pantheists. Also, some New Agers. So right here in America, a lot of American New Agers are pantheists. Sometimes they hug trees. Tree-hugging-ism. Okay. What's another ism? What's another term that's like that? It almost sounds the same. Panentheism. It's an E-N, but panentheism. In fact, it's very helpful. I mean, it's kind of a coincidence. It sounds like what it means in English.
He's in everything.
Yeah, all or, well, yeah, you could say it that way. But to take the words the way they're lined up, panentheism, all is in. I-N, but the word is E-N, but it's the same meaning as I-N. All is in God. So, pantheism if this circle is God, then God is all is God. Pan, in, and this en is like the word, is like the meaning, in. All is in God. How would you draw that? Symbolize that by a drawing. If this is a symbol of God, symbolizes God, well, how would you change the drawing from that to this?
It'd be in and outside of it, right?
Well, what is in and outside?
God is in and outside. He's everywhere. He's in everything.
Okay, let's follow the order of the words. Okay, all is in God. We're not saying God is in all. No. We're saying all is in God.
And all should go inside.
So you got a circle inside that circle?
Right.
Okay, there's something that doesn't touch the edge. So see here, these lines that are showing the all, trees and grass and people and dogs, it touches the end. Okay? So here you'd have to have things not touch the end, because God is bigger. God is bigger, and God is not those things, but those things are in God.
Okay.
So we'll try to get a better handle on it later on, perhaps, but here there's no difference between that stuff and God. God is that stuff is God. And it's all touching each other, and it's all kind of the same thing. It's all connected, the same size, you might say. Here, the stars and the rocks and the trees and people are inside of God, but it's not God. God is more than rocks and trees and people, but we are inside of Him. So it's like we're inside of His stomach. But God's not a stomach. You're not a stomach, but you have a stomach. It's in you. But it's not the same size as you or as much as you are. Okay, so God is bigger, but the stuff is in Him. But it's connected to Him, just like your stomach is connected to you. That means if we have a tantrum, what happens to God in this view?
Yes.
We affect Him. Yeah. We can make Him, if we move, then God moves. So it's like we're tied together. So it's like there are these, chains that connect the stuff to Him. So what He does, if God pulls that chain, He pulls us. If we pull the chain that way, we pull Him. So we affect Him, He affects us. Is that biblical?
No.
Now we are able to affect God, but is it a necessary effect? Where He has no choice. If we rub Jeannie's lamp, He has to come out of it. Is that biblical? No. Doesn't He have sovereign freedom?
Right. Yeah.
If He chooses to come out of the lamp, if we rub it, He will, but He doesn't have any obligation to. Is that right in the Bible? Here, this is like the Aladdin's lamp view of God. That because God is connected to that lamp, because the lamp is in God, the lamp is, within God, it touches God indirectly. So when you rub the lamp, God has to come out. Yes, Master. Can you think of a view on TV that's like this? How about a more serious Christian program? And we talked about it last night in part. Prosperity teaching, when they talk about things like this. When you pray this word, God has to do it. If you pray in faith, God must do it. When you use this prayer cloth with faith, God must heal. He will heal. It's guaranteed. It's automatic. Isn't that this? They will never admit it. They don't want to let people know that their theology is really, and at that degree, that part of it is panentheism, which is a pagan view. But it is that. And you can prove it because they say, this will heal every time, continually, if you do it the right way. Okay? So animism, in many ways, is panentheism. This is a version of animism.
Not defending in the sense that God limits Himself by His own word. That He, by His word, limited Himself by making promises and putting His word out there. That if His word said it, He has to, only because He's obligated to keep His word.
Yeah, there's some that there are some things that God will do because He has chosen to do that. But there are other things that... So you're right. Part of what God does is He decides voluntarily to obligate Himself to certain things. But other things, I think, on TV are going beyond that. And they're making God into a genie to do whatever we want, as long as we use faith. Yeah. So we'll take a break here, a camera break, and we'll come back with other isms.